American Crime debuts a new series on ABC this Thursday night, 10 p.m. Eastern Time, March 5th. And the creator and executive producer of this program is the Oscar winner from last year's Best Adapted Screenplay race, for the lack of a better phrase, 12 Years a Slave. Won that, as well as Best Picture. John Ridley, the scribe of 12 Years a Slave, and also now American Crime. Good to see you, sir.
Very good to see you. Thanks for
coming on this program. Yeah. And it's interesting, we just talked in the commercial break for the radio audience to the TV audience about what American Crime is and how it, in certain ways, what you're trying to get at is the heart of it puts some faces on what's normally a faceless situation with American Crime.
Yeah, I mean, normally, and look, there's shows that work to great success. It's about the police or some detective who has some hyper-real skill of seeing the color blue at a crime scene, and that's how they solve everything. And they work very, very well. But there's another side, and we want to get to a show that's a little bit more real, really about people and what it's like to have to deal with these situations. And not just the crime itself, but that cascade effect. I mean, these kinds of incidents are what can bring out either the best in us, the best in the people around us and our support system, or unfortunately we can fall victim to the worst in us, our own perspectives, our own narrow view, and you see individuals who are damaged by these events far more than they are invigorated by the opportunity to either stand up for the things they believe in or come together with the people around them.
So are these, for lack of a better phrase, ripped from today's headlines, as they would say back in the Law and Order days?
Yeah, the Law and Order. These are not so much ripped from the headlines. There is, I hope, in the show, an emotional honesty. There are obviously things that we are going to do in our show that people will draw parallels to things that are happening in real life, but less about trying to do an episode where you may watch and go, oh, I see there, it's a little bit like this or that, but try to create its own world, its own universe, not disconnected from the world we live in, but not about exploiting something that has really happened recently in the news.
Well, I know you are not on Twitter, correct?
Not on Twitter, not on Facebook.
So then what are your thoughts from being outside of, I guess, the social media world of the conversation that we've been having today in regards with Kurt Schilling and his daughter? And
I think you have done a really good job of framing that conversation. You had some very interesting callers call in.
Thank you.
This, based on what I know about the situation and what has been said, and that apparently there were these two individuals in particular who were...
They crossed the line. There's no way
it
to put
wasn't
it,
even... I mean, again, you're being kind at saying cross the line.
Right.
If I'm talking about how I feel about Congress, you may not agree with me. That's one thing. When someone's talking about assaulting anyone,
correct,
particularly a girl, particularly in the environment that we've seen around sports over the last year, there's no gray area as far as I'm concerned. There just isn't. And I was saying, sort of kidding on the square, I don't have a daughter, I have two sons. Where my daughter, the last thing these individuals would have to worry about is HR. Because that's just...
Because you're going after them.
Well, I mean, look, it's to the point, as you said, if you say some things in public, Mr. Schilling had the capacity to respond to that in a way that he used his notoriety, his prominence, to have these people called out. If you say that to the wrong person, they may not necessarily have that capacity to do it by channel. They may choose another way to do it, and you've got to deal with that. There's just, in that regard, there's no place for it. I don't think there's any parsing it, from what I understand.
Yes, and it's not parsing it. You're right.
You know, somebody was a school. You know, I've heard stories of school teachers who are at a bar having a beer, and they put it on Facebook, and they got fired. And it's like, well, come on, you're at the weekend. This is a whole other thing, and this is not a gray area issue, in my opinion.
I'm the creator and executive producer of the new ABC series American Crime, Thursday debut, 10 p.m. this Thursday night, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. John Ridley, when you are looking at a blank page and you've got 12 Years a Slave sitting next to you as something that you need to adapt, how in the world do you go about filling the page for something like that, John?
That was daunting in that Solomon Northup, who was the central figure in the story, true story, based on his memoir, and it was one of the most extraordinary documents I'd ever read because of what he went through, because of what we were going through as a nation, and also that he wrote this story. Ultimately, it was not about bitterness. It was not about hatred. It was about finding the beauty in some of the most difficult circumstances. And again, the best of us. You know, he was freed because there were so many people, black and white, who saw an injustice done. to be, I started this story in probably about 2010. I started working on it.
No
It's been
kidding.
about 4 years working on it. My circumstances were completely different. My worldview was different. My reactions as a person of color in 2010, my initial reactions were different. And it really was going back to a very fundamental space. He was a violinist. He was an amazing violinist. And I started with this concept of, in 1839, where do violin strings come from? And you don't go to Guitar Center and, you know, pay your $5 and get them.
No, you do not.
There is a process, and it is a, you know, if you watch it, it is not a pretty process. But out of that process, you know, you have to go, it's animal guts. You have to go, you have to get it, you have to slaughter an animal, you have to, a long process to get them. But at the end, you have violin strings, and someone can make very beautiful music. And I just equated that with this story, that there was a very horrific system in place, that people were caught up in it on all sides. There was a mass psychosis going on. But from that, there was an individual who was a freed black man, a free black man at that time in the North, who could not really understand this system the same way people who were in it, but going through it, as horrible as it was, as wrong as it was, when he came out of it with a better understanding of the world around him, of his family, of the people who were close to him, of his responsibilities, and quite frankly, the things that he did with the rest of his life in the abolitionist movement. It was difficult. It was difficult because that book was so far superior to anything that I thought I could ever do. It was far more emotional than anything I thought perhaps I could render. But it was a challenge that I think in the end, all the filmmakers, everybody involved, we lived up to. And I'm very happy that years later, people know, they may not know me, they'll know Solomon.
Well, there's no question about it, John. I mean, you deserve the Oscar for it, and,
Thank you.
and the film for Best Picture as well. There's no question about it. I'm going to take a break, and when we come back, I had no idea, watching that film, you know, the thought process that you had going into it. It's just fascinating to hear that. And now that I've met you, I also had no idea that you rooted for the Green Bay Packers. Certainly it's something I didn't think about back then, and now I'm eager to talk a little bit of football with you when we come back in just 60 seconds of time. Don't go anywhere. Back with more with John Ridley, Oscar winner, and also his new show, American Crime, on ABC. In just a moment. Welcome back to the Rich Eisen Show. The Oscar-winning scribe of 12 Years a Slave has a new show out as the creator and executive producer of, called American Crime. This Thursday, 10 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC. John Ridley here also to discuss American Horror Story, which is known as the last 5 minutes of the NFC Championship game for a Green Bay Packer fan such as yourself. You couldn't script that, correct?
Very, very quickly, the story. So my son, my older son, who's 14, he really wanted to go to the Super Bowl.
Right. Whoops. Sorry, say that again. My phone just went off. Go for it.
Because, you know, Siri wants to know how they lost, too.
I know.
Wanted to go to the Super Bowl, was going to take my dad and my other son, so it was going to be all of us. If the Packers were going in. If the Packers aren't in, he doesn't want to go.
Sure.
So the game is on. My wife's got her Green Bay Packers jersey on. I'm so nervous I can't watch the game. So I've got it on the TiVo, recording it. Watch a little bit of it, gets up to halftime, Packers are in control. I think, fine, I got a few things to do. I'm going to work here, and I'll catch up to the game later. Very quiet in the house, coming out about 6 o'clock on the West Coast time. For a family that's going to the Super Bowl, very quiet in the Ridley household. So I start going through this, and all of a sudden, moment by moment, and I get up to real time, suddenly it's overtime. And then I got to go back and look at this fake field goal that scores, this onside kick, this two-point conversion where the guys look like... And it's hard to talk about it because you sound like you're a Packers hater. I'm not. I love the Packers.
Of course.
Love them to death.
You just can't believe this sort of thing would happen.
Do you know, I don't know, how much is Russell Wilson getting paid? Because I could have, there are very few things I can actually accomplish in life. I can go to the other side of the field and just chuck it in the air. I mean, honest to God.
Listen, the one
and
thing...
I love Russell Wilson.
The one thing that got me more than anything else, though, if we are going to play back this nightmare, and I'm sorry to bring it up, but you know, this is just to show off your Packer fandom here, was Morgan Burnett picking the ball off with 5 minutes to go and then taking a knee inexplicably. I don't know why you wouldn't even just try and keep going for more yards or even a score. You never know what's going to happen.
It is the easiest thing in the world for me to sit here and parse that.
Me too.
But at the same time, I mean, you got to finish. And it was a half where the greatest team in football, the team that should have won, the team that we all know in our hearts and minds would have won,
right,
and probably will win every season, you know, except for oddities like this where the universe doesn't align.
Yes.
You know, they were just moment by moment, every single thing that, because here's the thing, you can't game plan for nonsense. Do you know what I'm saying? So.
Can I write that down, by the way?
Yeah, please write it down.
Is that a T-shirt, Law Brockman? You can't game plan for nonsense.
Quote.
Yeah, so Pete Carroll, seeing how badly they were losing, was saying, we got to go to the nonsense playbook. And guys, just do the stuff that you did when you were kids and you're at the park having a good time.
Sure.
Nobody, you know, it's like Karate Kid 2, where Ralph Macchio starts doing his kata. You know what I'm saying? And the other guy is like, how do you fight when the guy, I don't know what to do, and Ralph Macchio just walks up to him and kicks him in the head. Yep. That's what it is that Pete Carroll's a genius goes, stop playing regular football, go do this stuff that I can't say on the you know, the airwaves, that kind of football. And then, you know, you game plan. Poor Aaron Rodgers is standing there going, I'm trying to play a man's game. And these guys are playing, you know, good time, fun stuff. It's a lot of fun to watch, but, you know,
yeah, it is something that is inexplicable, and it's difficult to try and bring rational thought to what inexplicably happened. That said, though, for a franchise to move on from Favre, and I can name off the top of my head several franchises, the Dolphins, and many other. You've got who are trying to until Romo had this year, you could even say that they were trying to replace Troy Aikman there. It's so difficult to replace the legend, certainly with the guy right after the guy. Aaron Rodgers' dream come true.
When does that happen? You know, you look
it just doesn't happen.
Anywhere, almost any business, you have that, you know, you have major corporations, CEO leaves, they bring in another guy, and that's always the guy who's not going to work out because it's just a different culture. To go from a guy who played, I don't know, how many, 14, 15, 16 years there, I mean, basically my entire adult life, and to go to the other guy who, you know, you never know what happens in football, but he stays healthy. There's no reason he can't play at that level for 14 years or so. That's absolutely phenomenal. I mean, right next door in Chicago, they have, you know, they have a guy a week playing quarterback. And to have that kind of, I think it really speaks to, and I mean this very sincerely, you know, the Packers organization, if you go up there, if you go to a game, it is like the world's largest high school football game. There's a love, there's a sense of community. It is a community-owned team, and there's a pride. And I think that does make a difference. And how they, you know, it was a difficult situation in terms of moving from Favre to Rodgers. In the end, it all worked out very, very well. And I think for both guys, it worked out. But yeah, we are very fortunate in that space in Wisconsin to have one of the legendary teams in sports of all time.
Are you ready for John Ridley to break entertainment, sports news here on the Rich Eisen Show? Do we not to rip off from Dan Patrick directly, as we're accused of doing many times on Twitter, do we have some sort of breaking news music that we can play right here?
I don't have actual music. I have a car.
No one was prepared for this giant.
This is I mean, they have an Oscar winner here, and we don't have the
breaking news.
Okay. John Ridley, Oscar winner. Yeah. You have a Packer fandom that we have just heard all about. And you are doing what for next year's Super Bowl?
Very, very fortunate.
Coverage?
Worked on some amazing programs. And I got to preface this caveat. It's sort of first in goal.
Right.
Always entertainment. You got to dig across the goal line. But I was very fortunate. Tribeca Films, which is Robert De Niro's company, had asked me to write the Vince Lombardi story. So next year, CBS, if all goes according to plan, 50th anniversary of the Super Bowl.
Yes.
Super Bowl weekend, we will have a film from Tribeca, from Robert De Niro, about Vince Lombardi, and a very particular story. It is not cradle to grave, it is not his entire life, but looking at the man, the community, and football in that 60-61 season. They lost the previous year in the championship game to the Philadelphia Eagles. They played in the 61 game against New York, which is where Lombardi came from as an assistant. It was also the first year play of the AFL, and it was the beginning of that run towards the modern NFL, the modern era, and what that team had to do to overcome themselves, overcome some circumstances, and really become. It was the beginning of that legendary run for the Packers of the championships into the Super Bowl, and Vince Lombardi cementing his place as the great sports legend of our time.
Can't wait to see it. Thank you for letting us know about that.
That's so cool.
You all are the first to know about this, and honestly, I couldn't think of a better place to
Thank you.
announce this.
And it's awesome to have you here. It's
my pleasure. It really
John
was.
Ridley, thank you for coming in here. American Crime premieres Thursday, March 5th, 10 p.m. Eastern on ABC. The first episode is about who took Lupita's Oscar dress. Correct? That is the first. No, wait a minute. I'm conflating issues again. I've been doing that a lot.
I think it's the Smithsonian.
Is that what it is?
Every time she wears a dress, I'm telling you, it's Smithsonian ready. It is like ready to go.
Thanks again for coming in,
It's
John.
my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You bet.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern. On Audience.